All right, let's get a market update shortly, but first let's look at petrol. Government has stepped in to help South African motorists and taxi passengers, but there is still a small fuel price hike, and that has just in fact been confirmed by government. The price of petrol was going to go up by about R1.80, R1.90 on Wednesday, but government has now announced that the fuel levy will be reduced by R1.50, and the hike, to be exact, will be 28 cents. So whether you're using 95 or 98 unleaded, that will go up by 28 cents on Wednesday. The price of diesel, unfortunately, going up, it was meant to go up by about R3 a litre. So the effective fuel levy discount, it will go up now by between R1.52 and R1.68. So government saying if it hadn't intervened, those prices could have been soaring by R3 or so on Wednesday. But if you're using diesel, you're still looking at a R1.50 or so price hike. And of course, this is on the back of soaring prices for oil. The global fuel price, global oil price rather, has been hiked by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Higher prices here could have a ripple effect on other costs, threatening to push up inflation, the cost of living overall. All right, so the bad news is that the global oil price is up again today. It was looking better, but right now it's up by around 3%. The good news is that it was a strong start to the week on the markets. The JSE rose by 2%. The rand has strengthened today. It's trading close to R14.50 once again. That was a multi-month high that we saw about 2 weeks ago. On Friday, rating agency Moody's revised South Africa's credit outlook to stable. So maybe that's playing a role. It comes after more tax was expected, was collected rather, with Moody's saying that South Africa's fiscal position has improved. Let's take a look now at your main financial indicators. Public-private partnerships have been lauded as the answer to some of South Africa's economic woes, but something little spoken about is the risk to South Africa's coffers that they could present. The budget review that came out earlier this year shows that these public-private partnerships do come at a cost for government. When projects such as the Gautrain or e-tolls got into trouble during the COVID-19 lockdowns, it was government that was expected to keep those projects afloat. It's a Monday, so we have our weekly chat. We're joined by our economics editor, Tshepo Mongoai. Great to have you with us again, Tshepo. How's it? Before we look at public-private partnerships, can we quickly look at petrol? Is this a bit of a relief? So 28 cents for petrol. We've got to confirm. Diesel between R1.50 and R1.60 or so.
Yeah, we're seeing some pressure coming from the diesel price, and we know that it's used, by the producers. It's used by farmers, and the big trucks use diesel. Yeah. So it's still going to exert some pressure on producer price inflation, and as a result, consumer price inflation is also going to increase as a result. So although it's welcome, it's some good news there. It's not as high as we were expecting, but we're expecting that it's going to keep inflation elevated for quite some time, especially for the consumers, many of them who are dealing with very high prices as you speak.
And it's interesting that we're talking about diesel, so the hike there is much more significant than the hike for petrol. And we're already seeing sunflower oil and things like that going up quite significantly because of the conflict. And now you're talking about farmers using tractors, so this is about the knock-on effect across food products, possibly across grocery stores.
I mean, my issue is I don't see see how inflation is not going to be generalized in the coming months, especially maybe in the third and fourth quarter. I think we're likely to see broad-based inflationary pressures in many areas of the economy. Yes, the Reserve Bank has made it very clear that they're determined to keep it under control, and their projection does show that although it's expected to increase maybe around over 5%, 6%, they're quite optimistic that they will be able to maintain it, not beyond that levels. But it's a difficult one because inflationary pressures are there and they're rearing their ugly heads, and how far they can go, that's a big question.
All right, let's talk about public-private partnerships, which are often lauded, but it's not all good news. Just tell us what you found in the budget review.
Well, public-private partnership, it's something that government for a long time, although they're a classical example of some success stories that we've seen in the past few years, is not something that government had really paid much attention to. But it has delivered roads, it has delivered the Gautrain and Sun Parks, for example. They are running some of the parks. Transport, they are very classical example, good examples where government has actually partnered with the private sector. And the question is, why does government go into the private partnership? Is it simply because you are able to galvanize private sector capital? But we know there are risks, contingency liabilities, because in most instances, government must actually take risk. Government must make certain guarantees to the private sector. And we know that the private sector is usually reluctant to invest. So government must actually show an appetite for risk in order to attract those private investors, and also to attract the finance into those projects.
And you say COVID-19 was an interesting example. So did that show that the risks, say, around the Gautrain were equally borne by the public and private partners, or skewed towards government, in fact?
No, absolutely. You must remember that these projects, you find that they are financed. There are two ways where they are financed. It's either through unitary charge, or the other projects are financed through charges that the private sector who's operating that project would have to charge consumers. So let's go back to COVID. During COVID, for example, I'll make an example of Chipman's Peak, where there was not enough...
Not a car in sight.
Exactly, there was not enough traffic. And remember that government makes certain guarantee in terms of revenues that these projects will deliver. And obviously the private sector will go and mobilize capital. And when the private sector is not getting that money, that's when those claims are made in terms of guarantee by the private sector, and fairly so. So currently the contingency liability is sitting at around 8 billion rand.
Sure. So this may make us rethink public-private partnerships in terms of COVID-19, in terms of risk in future, although, like you say, they have delivered something to watch. Thank you very much for our weekly chat, our economics editor, Tshepo Mongoai, and it's time for your sporting action now with Ollie.